Ted Rall, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, host of TMI, Too Much Information, the morning show with Manila Chan at 10 to 12, Monday through Friday. Welcome to the show, Ted, and Happy New Year, man. How you doing today?
Happy New Year to you, too. Don't cut off any heads.
Yeah, man, it's a grim day to start, to put it mildly. I need to get your take on, well, I guess there are two things, right? I guess three things. I guess the first one is the attack in New Orleans on Bourbon Street.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was going, I was just giving a brief rundown to the audience. I did it the first thing this morning. I'm doing it again now. And by the way, before I even get into this, this is shameless. If you guys dig the content and you find yourself coming back here often, definitely support this content. You can do so through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chat. All chats and stickers will be read, provided they're not racist, sexist, or bigoted. Also, like the content, share it, and hit the subscription button. Apparently, somebody told me, I did not even know that you accepted donations for the show. Because oftentimes when I'm doing, I'm slicing up the videos, and the slicing up the videos don't have that part in it. So there's that. I hate doing that. It's so humiliating. To always add that part in, but it's just kind of part of the job. Welcome to the show, man, and Happy New Year. I'm glad to have you. I wanted to have you either to close the New Year out or to bring the New Year in. You've been a good friend of this show going all the way back to radio days. And so thank you for it. Give me your take on the Bourbon Street thing. So they're calling it ISIS-inspired, but as I pointed out to the audience, there's a mental health component to this that can't be ignored. Apparently, the guy got divorced. On top of being divorced, he apparently had a mental breakdown. He was going to kill his family, his entire family, but decided to spare his family and just kill as many other Americans as he could possibly kill. He gets a truck, rents a truck, drives that truck to Bourbon Street. There were supposed to be these barricades, but those barricades, for whatever reason, were not up, in which case he could drive the car and plow it into the people and the civilians. Gets out the car, goes on a shooting spree, gets into a firefight with cops. The cops ends up killing him, shooting him dead. Apparently, he rented the truck from the same place, I believe, of the Elon Musk thing, but I could be wrong on that front.
The same
yes, right. And so the Elon Musk thing was apparently they tracked down that guy. That guy also was part of the military and apparently went to the same military, I think Fort Bragg, that this guy did, that Jabbar did. And so people are making links and seeing whether or not these things are connected to one another. Elon Musk, of course, wants them to be because he doesn't want it to come out that he had a faulty truck that blew up. But as I pointed out to the audience, the truck is built for the explosion to go up, which means that there was some understanding that it could blow up. So there's that, right?
Right.
But give me a take on all of this. I mean, this is fascinating. I mean, it's a crappy way to start the new year off, especially for the people who are just going out to celebrate. But give me a take. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's a little spooky. I hadn't been to New Orleans for 10 years, but I went 3 weeks ago with my son. I was there.
Did you?
It was a month ago for Thanksgiving week. I was there for Thanksgiving week, and I hadn't been there in a long time. So, obviously, I stayed in the Treme area, and we walked around Bourbon Street, right, including right where that happened. And I did notice the construction on those bollards that they were going to install. I did notice that they weren't done when I saw them. I guess they're still not done. Construction takes time. I mean, in cities, particularly old cities where, if you hit something that's like everything's historically landmarked, right? So they have to stop and do things. And New Orleans isn't exactly the richest city. So I'm sure things don't go, or the least corrupt. So I'm sure things don't go that fast. I mean, it was so, it's always spooky when something happens in a place where you just visited. I'm not to say, but, my first take when I heard that this was a guy with an Arab sounding name, ex-military, I was like, I bet this is an ISIS self-radicalized situation. My mind bounced back to a couple of similar attacks. There was the Fort Hood attack in, I guess, 2009. That was not ISIS technically, but it was a Yemen-based kind of analogous jihadi group that kind of recruited this guy online who was I guess also kind of like a sergeant too. And he had gotten pissed off at what he had learned about U.S. foreign policy I think a lot of people in the military have a front row seat to U.S. policy in the Middle East, and even if they themselves didn't serve there, they certainly are friends and colleagues with people who do. So it reminded me of that. It reminded me of also Texas connection. There was a right-wing cartoonist contest gathering in Garland, Texas, about 15 years ago, and the two self-radicalized American ISIS members showed up with AR-15s in the full kind of like jihadi get up with the masks and ninja outfits, ready to kill lots of people. Fortunately, this was a right-wing cartoonist gathering, so they had hired armed security. And so I was always thinking, if this was a liberal one, everyone would have died. And so they had armed security, and they were shot immediately as soon as they got out of their truck.
That shouldn't be funny, but it is.
And then there's also, well, you got to laugh when you can. And then there was an ISIS, I believe it was ISIS, but definitely radical jihadi kind of self-radicalized, motivated attack on bicyclists on the west side of Manhattan a few years ago, where where a guy like basically stopped his truck and deliberately ran down bicyclists on the lower part of the west side highway, sort of not too far from the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. That's kind of like been forgotten. I think only one or two people were killed at that time, and then the assailant was also killed by NYPD. So, I mean, what struck me about all these things, first of all, was I was impressed by New Orleans and their law enforcement reaction, that they basically engaged with this assailant immediately. That, thinking about, compare that to like recent events in New York City, where we had, people sort of on the lam all day long. And I'm not even talking about Luigi, just on the lam, running around Midtown Manhattan for hours until they're finally turned in. No cops to be seen anywhere. And so, it's self-radicalization is very potent. It's, when there's a narrative that is appealing because it's accurate, namely that the United States is engaged in, sort of a war of civilizations against Islam and in all over the world, that, you can see why people would be that will be appealing to people who are Muslim themselves. And they're going to be like, these are my brothers and sisters who are being attacked, in Gaza and all over the place, and Yemen. And I want to do something. They feel like they're resistance fighters. I'm sure that's exactly how they feel. And then, of course, there's the mental health component that you brought up, which is, always interesting, right? I mean, my grandfather was mentally ill. He was in the French Resistance. Was he a hero? Was he a nut? Well, he was both. And it's kind of like, Muhammad Atta, by all accounts, the head hijacker on 9/11, by all accounts, he was not mentally ill. I mean, he was totally, sane. He would have, if he'd been captured alive, he would have been totally put on trial, and insanity defense never would have worked. But then there are other cases where people are, mentally weak, let's just say, and they're more prone to being recruited for things like this. So it's really complicated, which is why my answer is so long. And I think, and the real problem here is, of course, he's gone, so we don't get to ask any questions.
And see, that's the other part. I hate it when the people because, well, there are a few reasons, right? Our government lies to us a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And, because the government lies to us a lot, it makes it difficult to know where the floor is, like what's real in this situation. I'm not saying that this is not real. So I just want to be very clear that I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying our government lies a lot. And the reality of these things, it's always a little bit better to solidify the reality of it when that person is alive. Like when they whack the guy that kills Kennedy, what is his name? Lee Harvey Oswald, for example. Okay, well, you can't question Harvey Oswald. Like, that case looks very dodgy right off the bat. It looks like there was another shooter. It looks like the government was trying to cover it up. And then you get like 60 years where the government has all of these secret files that don't say anything about it.
And then the guy who whacks Oswald himself dies, right?
That's what I mean, right?
Jack
and so it's kind of like, okay, how do we know that this is real in the context of who killed Kennedy and how it happened and everything else? And we just supposed to have to take the official word for it. Okay, well, I don't. And so you're going to have a lot of people who are going to be very skeptical that this is exactly what they say it is. And you're getting it now, right? You're getting people saying, well, this guy was an immigrant. Okay, he wasn't an immigrant. He was born in Texas. Like, cut it out. And then you're going to try to get, well, this was about ISIS, and ISIS has just attacked the U.S. Okay, well, it sounds like this guy had a mental breakdown. Right here, for example, it says the FBI is studying the videos Biden referenced in his remarks, which the suspect appears to record while driving from Texas to Louisiana. Law enforcement confirmed on ABC News. This says the videos are dark, so the suspect is hard to see. But the suspect can be heard talking about his divorce and his desire to kill members of his family before ultimately deciding to carry out the attack on Bourbon Street, according to enforcement official. The suspect is also heard talking about ISIS. They mentioned the spokesman for the consulting firm Deloitte confirmed to ABC News that Jabbar worked for the company at staff level since 2021. And so I guess that's kind of my point, right? It's like he's talking about both things. They're going to focus on terrorism because that's sexier. We're fighting terrorists. That fits within a context, a narrative. The man having a mental breakdown because of a divorce, less so. Less so. But both are relevant, right? One inspires the other in many respects. This is going to get spun in so many different ways, depending upon the context of the people who want to spin it. But right now, I would say the biggest myth that has been floating on social media is, hey, that guy looks foreign. That guy's an immigrant. He came through the Mexican border that Joe Biden left wide open. It's like, okay, just shut up.
That's just not true. Also, you can't really, there's no anti-terrorist action that you can take against this brand, right? I mean, you don't, with ISIS, it's not like ISIS members are sent from the Middle East to the United States across a border or into an airport. I mean, ISIS is a brand that anyone, right, like, can just say, I'm going to self-deputize myself as a member of ISIS. You don't even have to talk to ISIS. You don't have to email them or anything. You just you print out the flag. You declare yourself a member of ISIS, and then retroactively, after you carry out your attack, then you say, they take responsibility and say, or they take credit, right? And they say, that was our guy. I mean, you with that model, traditional anti-terrorism activities are just not going to work, even if they would have been effective normally. I mean, it literally is like you're trying to kill an idea. Yeah. And because it is just an idea, and ideas are viral. And, so what is the idea? The idea is that the U.S. is engaged in violence against Muslims and Muslim regimes in the Middle East and in Central and South Asia. And that the U.S. public, like people, just normal schlumps walking around New Orleans celebrating New Year's Eve, are all complicit because they're U.S. citizens and they pay taxes into the defense budget that carries out these foreign policies. Well, I mean, okay, the thing is, the first part is definitely true that the U.S. government does do all these things.
Second part
the
is
second
true.
Part is like debatable, highly debatable.
That's also true.
But
let's be honest. That's our argument about the Middle East, right? Like when we are going after Saddam Hussein, or when we're going after these leaders, we've said this guy is a bad guy, and so we are okay blowing it to hell. Whether it's with Assad and all of the Christians, Alawites, and all of these other groups that are being tortured and killed right now, we didn't care about the fact that those people were still under that particular government. We wanted to get rid of Assad. When we go after Libya, we have no clear, we don't care at all about the local populations that are there. I mean, even sanctions. If you think about the sanctions that we were applying to Syria, for example, it was crippling that country and the people who are living under those sanctions. Venezuela, another situation where it's like you have these crippling sanctions that are not punishing the leaders. Assad had like cars and everything else. He was still living in wealth. It was the populations that those things were going after. So I agree with you. I guess my feeling is, and again, I think this had more to do with mental illness than the other part. But I agree with the premise.
Case. Yeah,
in this case.
But
and in other cases.
That will not always be the case.
Agreed.
And sort of like, I mean, even if it is this, let's just say, stipulate for the sake of argument, that everybody who does this is mentally ill. Okay, well, we've got a lot of, a huge population of mentally ill people. Yeah. So if you really want to attack that idea that, like, I mean, the only way you could attack that idea is to remove that idea as being true. Even if you told mentally ill people we are being attacked by the people of Venus, most mentally ill people would be sane enough to think that's probably not true, and that would not catch on. So it's like you have to suck the air out of that narrative by not doing these things anymore. Not to mention, I don't think you would have as many terrorist groups like ISIS targeting the United States or posting online material targeting the United States if we were not engaged in that particular way in the Middle East. We just wouldn't. And this is not to say that we deserve this, or certainly not that the people in New Orleans deserve this. They had nothing to do with it. They're just out for the night. But,
just be clear, I'm not making that argument at all. It's just
that the U.S. government is what they're saying is pointless. It's dumb. It's like you guys don't get it. You don't know what you're doing.
I mean, in one sense, we are decrying a group that we are supporting in another sense. It's just outrageous. Like, Jelani was out there chopping heads and killing Americans. Like, let's be very clear. And, being the affiliate for Al-Qaeda, the leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria. And this was before he was being part of ISIS. Like, the same group that we are saying, this group is horrible, this group is horrible. In another sense, we are supporting their activities in another country because we don't like the government of that other country. We do it all over the world, like these terrorists, whether it's in Ukraine and the Nazis, whether it's the kill squads in South America where we were going after the Sandinista government. So we are, okay with putting money into overthrowing those governments, putting in dictators. Like, we have zero issue with using terrorists, Nazis, or any of these right-wing groups, these lunatics for hire, in order to knock over governments that we don't necessarily like. And then we're shocked when that stuff comes home to roost. It's outrageous. Like, the idea, the dichotomy of us, let's say last month, backing terrorists to knock over Syria, while simultaneously today shaking our fists at terrorists who apparently attacked. It's just astonishing. That's all. It's the political entanglements that we allow. And the media is not going to report it that way. The media is going to say ISIS-inspired attack. And because we're love and light, we don't like to support governments. We don't like dictators. None of that stuff is true, right? Like,
none of that stuff is true.
It's just frustrating.
We like our terrorists. We like our dictators. We don't like the other side.
We like our monsters.
And the other side's dictators.
It is just
sometimes we're the same dictator. So Saddam Hussein used to be our dictator.
Yes, he was. So was Gaddafi at one point.
Absolutely.
France had no issue with Gaddafi at one point. It's just frustrating. Like, these people, that could have been any of us, right? I mean, I used to take trips on New Year's. That was when I had a job. And you would have, like, that could have easily been me just moseying around, looking in windows, and bam, you're no longer associated with this life. And you did nothing but go puttering about like Bourbon Street, of all places, one of the most populated places that you can find on New Year's. Like, it's just astonishing. Those people are just gone, just like that. I know some people are going to look at this and say, oh, poor American. Fair enough. But, I find these people to be as innocent as people abroad in the same way. I don't like it in either case. New York shooting. What is going on with that? So this was another travesty that took place, this one last night. There are cops all over the place. Apparently there was some kind of nightclub. I assume that people were getting their groove on, as they typically do, and decided to come out shooting over something stupid. That's my assumption. New York. apparently they found cops to pollute this place, or sort of like be all over the place.
Yeah, so that's where they are, because I've been looking for them here in New York.
Yeah, a lot of people have been looking for them.
Yeah.
A lot of people have been looking for the cops.
Oh, there you are. There you are.
So what is going on with the subways in New York? Like, so Hochul comes out and says subways are safe. Then you get a woman set on fire. You get a stabbing.
Before the woman got set on fire before Hochul said that.
Oh, really? I thought it was after. And then apparently there was another situation where somebody gets thrown off the platform into a moving train.
Yeah.
What the hell is going on with New York, Ted?
That he's still alive. I hope he pulls through. He's in critical condition. As you can imagine, he fell into the trough between the tracks. The train passed over him. Everyone assumed he was gone, but obviously the injuries were severe. But he may make it. I hope so. That happened on my subway line, so I'm like, oh my god.
Did you? Did it?
So it's on the number 1 line. In a safe neighborhood. 18th Street is Chelsea. It's a very safe neighborhood. So, it's a cute station. It's a little bit, it's a small little station. It's very weird that it happened there. I mean, anyway, the thing is, today in the New York Times, they're saying, despite the city's efforts to make the subways safer, it's just not working. And it's like, okay, well, first of all, they're finally admitting the statistics are there has been an uptick in violent crime in the subway system. Great. Okay. But there's no effort at all to make the subways safer at all. There used to be, and you've heard me rant about this before, up until the 80s, there was an entire New York City transit police force with their own uniforms, their own logo, their own training mechanism. And these cops, if you ever see the Taking of Pelham 123, the original version, you see them with their leather jackets. They're really cool looking cops. These were cops they lived and breathed the subways. Every night train had two subway cops. They'd walk through, open the doors, twirl their nightstick. They always knew what was going on. If you needed to summon one, you could yank the emergency brake. They'd all come running. If a suspect ran into a tunnel, they would be able to kill the power and chase them. And they knew the tunnels. This was an expertise. Giuliani got rid of the transit police, and that's okay back in the 90s because the city was so much safer because of the expanding economy, the end of the crack epidemic. So it was like, oh, no big deal. We don't really need them anymore. But now we do. And there's no cops in the subway at all. Sometimes you'll see a little gaggle of them, all in a cluster, like 9 of them, all by the turnstiles up on the upper level. Never on the trains, never on the platforms. And they're all on their phones. They're like teenagers. And I don't know what they're doing, Candy Crush or whatever, but they're not doing their jobs. And if you talk to any New Yorker, they will tell you the same thing. And it's so laughable. When the train pulls into certain stations, there will be an announcement that will say, police are on the upper level of this station. If you have any questions or concerns, you can reach them there. It's like, excuse me, psychotic, person who is holding me up at knife point. I must stop and go upstairs and consult with the NYPD at this time. You keep that. You hold that thought. You keep that right here. I'll be right back. I mean, these things are moving in seconds. You're trapped inside a metal box under the surface of the earth, with no phone that works, no way to reach out. You're on your own in there.
So what is the issue? They just don't want to pay for it?
I don't understand the issue. It must have something to do with that. I mean, obviously the city is broke post-COVID, and the budget deficit is crazy. The migrant crisis, the shrinking tax base from the shrinking of because of work at home, and all the office buildings are shrinking. But it is a catastrophe in terms of the safety of the system is non-existent. You're on your own. If something comes up, I mean, a couple weeks ago, guys just randomly fixated on me and started yelling at me. And I won't lie. I mean, I was scared. I'm 6'2". I can handle myself, but I had recently broken my wrist. I was in a brace at the time. I'm thinking, if I have to mix it up with this dude who's half my age, he's going to kick my ass. You know, I mean,
never
it's
admit
like,
to your Ted. Never admit that. Never admit
well,
that.
so fortunately, he was just,
somebody's going to notice. Is like, I think that's Ted Rall.
We both stayed seated.
A bad
it was all right, no big deal. But my point is, like, it's scary in there, and I don't know why they're not doing anything. All I know is that the cops, whether you're talking about above ground or underground, they're standing down.
That's amazing.
They have been standing down ever since BLM, and I don't know if it's their vengeance. Like, well, you know, if they want us to stop killing black people, we're not going to do our jobs. I don't know what it is. I don't know if that's it, but it seems like that might be it.
Because it seems I mean,
they're slow walking their jobs.
Well, for the governor to acknowledge we have a problem in our transit systems, meaning it's acknowledged.
Well, it's full of homeless people. I mean, it's insane. It used to be like during the day you would really never see them. They'd come in at night. You might see one on a train. You'd see in a car. Then it would be smelly, so everyone goes to the next car. Now there's 3 or 4 per car, every car in the day. So like, there's no. Often you can't sit down because there's so many homeless people sleeping sprawled across the benches. And a lot of them are psychotic. I mean, you know, if you weren't psychotic when you became homeless, you become psychotic from being homeless. So I have a lot of sympathy and for them. I'm like, you know, obviously I have compassion. I want them to be taken care of. I don't want them to be sleeping outside or on the subway. But I mean, this is a broken system. They shouldn't be in the subway.
That's astonishing. I mean, like it's, you know, and I'll show you something else. One of the things, and the reason I'm bringing this up, so the Guardian Angels, this group has apparently resumed walking through the subway systems. And listen to what he's saying for the moment. And I remember listening to this, feeling off about this. And I think I know why I feel off about this, but I'm going to play the clip from him.
Well, in day and night patrols, 3-person patrols, we're all together. We're walking through the cars, which is something the police no longer do. Notice there are no mental health workers, there are no crisis intervention. They have all these fancy names. I've never seen them. And we spend millions of dollars on my day. Our job is, A, do a wellness check on a homeless person. If they're homeless or emotionally disturbed, see if they're okay. If all of a sudden we walk into a situation where there's an episode, which oftentimes happens, we have to calm it down. A lot of times, these homeless and emotionally disturbed persons, they know of the Guardian Angels. We can have a calming effect. We can also bring the situation.
You know, two thoughts immediately with this. One, if what happened in New Orleans happened in New York, you're right. It would have been a while before the cops ever got there. The guy might have, you know, killed even more people because of the slow response that New York has. 2, they shouldn't have to do that. That was I was like, we pay for cops for a reason. They shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have a situation where a group of vigilantes, for all intents and purposes, I know they're not killing people and anything else, but they're effectively coming together and taking over the job of the police department, because the police department, who gets billions of dollars, by the way, New York is massive. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, spend more than $10 billion on the cops. Correct me if I'm wrong, that number sounds high, but it's a huge amount of money. You shouldn't need civilians to come together and do the job of policing. The police have just completely abdicated in New York. I don't know if it's an issue with the governor. I don't know if it's an issue with the incompetent mayor. I don't know where that issue is, but they have gotten to the point of saying enough is enough. We'll take on the responsibility ourselves as citizens of New York. That's my issue with this. It's not so much, it's like I respect what they're doing. I just feel like they shouldn't have to do it. Give me your thought.
Jamal, you're right. I mean, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, while I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking about how, first of all, New York City has some of the highest taxes, income and sales and use taxes in the United States, right? So this is a capitalist society, unfortunately, from my point of view. And but the point is, you should get what you pay for. And we do pay a lot in this city for everything, not just, you know, but taxes in particular. And so, you know, we are footing the bill. It's not like this is a little town in rural Idaho, you know, where it's like suddenly we're overrun by crime and they don't know what to do because there's only 2 cops. this is like, we have the infrastructure to deal with this. And when I think, well, why is this happening? I think in the end, we're going to find out that there's some kind of massive systemic financial corruption within the city and the NYPD. It reminds me of, you've heard of the Gilgo Beach serial killing, right, in Long Island, where there's at least one, well, there's one suspect currently, looks like it's probably him, in custody. And there may have been multiple serial killers operating and killing, particularly prostitutes in Long Island. And the thing is, that went basically unsolved for about 25 years. Bodies kept washing up on the same beach over and over and over. And it came to pass, ultimately, why the Suffolk County Police never caught anyone. Because what was going on was that the chief of police in Suffolk County was corrupt. He was grifting. He was on the take, and he was ultimately arrested and jailed for basically running, a very corrupt county police department that was in charge of this. And it turns out that all throughout this period, when the bodies were washing up, the FBI was reaching out and saying, "Hey, we know you have a problem here. We'd like to help out and send our top guys from Quantico to examine all the physical evidence in these cases, and let's nail this SOB," right? It's like, but the cop's like, no, I've got all this. Why? Because he didn't want the FBI in his business and then maybe accidentally figuring out what he was up to, right? So then, once he was gone, there was a woman who was hired from within the ranks. She was elevated to the police chief. She had been like stewing like all the other like underlings who were like, we want to get on top of this. She like formed a task force. Boom! Within like 6 months, this guy was under arrest, right? And of course, she did reach out to the FBI and availed herself of everything. So and I keep thinking there must be something like this, like when things don't make sense, where it's just sort of like, this is New York City. You got, we have the cops, and this is a city where you used to see cops everywhere. When I got here, 40 years ago, you'd see them doing street patrol. You'd see them at the diner. You see them at the pizza place. They're always on the sidewalk. There's always, if you need a cop, seriously, you could just go hang out on the street. Within 3-4 minutes, a cruiser is going to go by. You can flag them down. It's like they're all over the place. That's not true anymore. Like when they say there's no cops when you need them, that's 100% true. That didn't used to be true.
Wow. I'm just shocked by how New York has degraded. Do you think, would you put this on COVID or would you put this on BLM? Meaning, do you think it's a situation
they were one and the same, kind of, right? Because they happened at the same time. And I always said that BLM would never have been as big a deal without COVID. I remember one time it was like came to me. I was parking my car and a BLM protest was going right by. And this one guy goes to me just randomly. He goes, you know why I'm here? I go, no. He goes, no Yankees games. Everything's closed. There's nothing else to do. And I think when, people were, unemployed, underemployed, working from home, all the movie theaters are closed, no ball games. It's kind of like it creates the space for a bigger protest movement, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of like, this is what's going on. It doesn't mean that people don't care about the cause at other times, but you have the time. People need time. And that's why there's more protests on weekends than there are during the weekdays, right? And so they're one and the same. And I do think that a lot of cops, white cops in particular, but not exclusively, were bitter, and they felt we're underappreciated. We're being picked on by the liberal elites and all that, and so we're going to withhold our labor. If you don't like what we do, fuck off. And I think that was part of it. And I think also the city ran out of money, and they're not talking about it, because if that word goes out, it'll become like a doom loop that goes even faster. Oh, New York City's bankrupt. Oh, better not invest in New York City. And then everyone pulls out and it gets even worse. So they're trying to talk it up. They're trying to fake it till they make it, I think. But, it's not working, because anybody can plainly see that the city's in crisis.
Yeah, there's something obviously wrong. It just is, right? One of the other interesting things that's been floating about is the H1B1 fight. I have been fascinated by this fight.
Me too.
That's been taking place. personally, I think MAGA is right on this. You have corporations that are obviously abusing the H-1B1 visa program to maximize their own profit. That is my context in general. Corporations want to maximize their profit. They're legally bound to do so. And if you can do so by gutting labor, and then you get, this belief that the billionaires, like Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, Donald Trump, are supposed to somehow care about labor, despite the fact that they've used this kind of "Make America Great" framing for this stuff. And so you get this kind of anti-corporate argument that is coming out of like Steve Bannon, Laura Loomer, hell, even Charlie Kirk saying, "Oh my God, this is not what we voted for. This is horrible." And you get Trump siding with the globalists, as they call them. Basically saying, I like H-1B1s. I think H-1B1s are great. I want to play this clip from Steve Bannon because this clip he is a maniac about China. He is like out of his mind about China. He is right about Elon Musk. At least I think so. I want to get your take on this and I want to play this other clip also to piggyback on this because it's not like they haven't mentioned this. Like, there are some people who say, well, this never came up in the debates. Fair enough. It never came up in the debates. But you have commentary from people like J.D. Vance, from Vivek Ramaswamy, from Donald Trump himself, talking about how these things get abused. Donald Trump on the debate stage, I've abused these things. We shouldn't have them to be functioning like this. And when I'm president, blah, 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 blah. So this is Bannon having no F's to give, going after Elon Musk. And again, I think he's a lunatic about China. I think he's right about Musk. This is Bannon.
Crony capitalism and Elon Musk. And by the way, when we cut him off, he went begging the CCP, and that's why they have the joint venture in Shanghai, the Tesla, which is 100% of his value, right? This guy lives on government contracts and taxpayer subsidies. Okay, it's all. We're going to get Joe Allen in here for a second to transform it. Elon Musk, once again, brother, I'm smart enough to tell you no to your face, and I'm evil enough to be able to expose you as a running dog for the greatest enemy this nation's ever had. You're a war profiteer. You're sleeping with the enemy, brother, and you've been doing it because you're not an American nationalist. You're not even an American. All you are is a globalist, okay? A globalist. And you will go where anybody writes you a check, and you would take it from Adolf Hitler himself because you're taking it from people that are as bad as Adolf Hitler. The murderous regime of.
You would take a check from Adolf Hitler himself. Now, just to be very clear, that these people who are in power, meaning whether it's Trump, Vance, Ramaswamy, all of these people know that the H-1B1 visa program is damaged and problematic, and yet they're backing it. This is Vivek when he's talking about right here, H-1B1 being a broken system, and yet again they're fully in on this.
A lot of the people who have come here through the H-1B system would tell you, as I would, that it is just a broken system, no matter who you're seeking to serve. For example, you want to talk about special interests and lobbying? This is direct Silicon Valley lobbying that said that if you get your H-1B visa and you're hired by one company, you're effectively like a slave. You can't switch to a different company. That's not a free labor market. So there's so much that's broken and bureaucratized. Here's the next question about the H-1B visa system is why the heck do we do it on the basis of a lottery when you could actually just select the very best people? So there's a lot that's broken about the administrative state, the bureaucracy. My general approach is when something's broken in government, you can't really fix it when it's lasted that long. You need to shut it down, start with a blank slate.
Now, keep in mind, these are the same people, by the way, that want to get rid of the Department of Education. So in one sense, it's, yeah, we need to get, Americans are lazy. And by the way, whites, this is not just blacks, right? They're talking about all Americans. Americans are lazy. We can't find super qualified people who are excited to do these jobs. And so we got to bring in more labor from abroad and overseas. And simultaneously, we need to get rid of the Department of Education because we don't like bureaucracies, and this is a problem in our country.
And we don't want to forgive student loans or make college education
exactly
cheaper. We don't want to make Americans be able to get STEM degrees so that they can make H-1B visas not necessary.
Isn't that astonishing? Like how much magical thinking can you pack into 1 week of conversation?
Well, it's also, I mean, the thing is, so the H-1B visa system is not just broken, it's just not it's also, it is broken, as he said, as Vivek said, but it's also a lie. So, I mean, it's not being enforced, right? So the law says that you can't, that if you're a tech company, let's say, it's not just tech companies, but mostly they're in the news. So if you're like, let's say, Alphabet, and you want to bring in some Indian coders or whatever, you've got to prove that you put out a legitimate, real call for American coders for this job, and that you tried, you did everything you could, you brought in everyone you could, you were serious about hiring them, you just couldn't find any, and then when you were out of desperation, you turned to the H-1B visa program. You certify that. It's just not true. And and you can show that by the fact that 4% of American tech workers are unemployed. Their unemployment rate for the tech sector, for STEM graduates, is higher than for the average, than the overall unemployment rate. Our people, we have hundreds of thousands of tech workers, many of them kind of like over 40, so therefore victims of ageism, not going to be hired in Silicon Valley, not being considered or taken seriously. And so as far as I'm concerned, if you have one American tech worker, one, who could do the job, or maybe their training's rusty, but you could train them in a few months to do the job, then no H-1B visas for you. Sorry.
Agreed.
None. I mean, you look out for your own first. That's what the law says, for one thing. And so you could just say the law needs to be enforced. But I mean, I think since the law is obviously there's no enforcement mechanism whatsoever, I kind of agree with old Vivek 1.0, like, get rid of it. It's not a working system. I went to engineering school. I was only there for 3 years. I went to Columbia Engineering School. I was an applied physics and nuclear engineering major. So I graduated later. They threw me out after junior year. I came back as a history major. So I'm a history major. But I spent 3 years, as an engineer. And I know lots of people who did graduate from my school, my classmates. And I talked to lots of counselors, jobs counselors at Columbia and other places. My dad went to MIT, Caltech, and Stanford. He's an engineer. And the thing is, there's not really a lot of employment opportunities for Americans in the U.S. I mean, it's a tough field of business. I mean, first of all, it's hard to get into these schools. And when you do get out, you're highly specialized. Let's say you're like a applied physicist. Well, okay, that's great, but if they're hiring for mechanical engineers, you can't get that job. If they're hiring for chemical engineers, you can't get that job. You got to hope that like the right defense contracts are coming up at the right time, or if you're a civil engineer, that the country's in the mood to build new bridges. They're not always in the mood to build new bridges. So like, and then you'll get that shot to build some new bridges, and then like, you're like a professional athlete, then like, you work for 15 years, then you don't work ever again. So the point is, and engineering jobs don't really pay that well. But the other statistic is, as Vivek alluded to, it is indentured servitude. If you come from, say, India to the United States, and I mention India because it's the #1 source of H-1B visas, you work for that one company. If that one company, and I've known people in this position, when they don't need you anymore, or let's just say they don't like the cut of your jib, or they, you piss off your boss, you're gone. And not only are you gone, you have to immediately leave the country.
Leave the country.
Yep. People, like, I knew someone who they had to go to the airport, and literally they had to leave so fast they couldn't even sell their car. And the airport is full at New York of these H-1B former H-1B visa holders. They drive their car to the airport. They put a note on the windshield saying, "I had to leave. Please dispose of my car."
Wow.
It's like that. They can't like shop around and look for another possible employer. And they're paid 60% as much as an American is paid for the same job. So this is a compliant workforce. They terrorize all the Americans are constantly told, like, if you don't, toe the line, if you're sassy, if you ask for a raise, we'll replace you and bring in someone from Bangladesh. So shut up. And so, I mean, it's toxic. It is, I mean, if you could, and also this whole idea, like, even it's like Trump, and there's like this implication, like, well, America really needs to recruit people for these high-end jobs. I would argue that if we're going to bring in foreigners to work, I don't want them taking the best jobs.
Exactly.
Let them have the shitty jobs, right?
Yeah.
Like really, truly, the best jobs I want to have going to my fellow citizens, paying, and I want them to earn that money and pay those taxes and buy their cars. I want, it's a ridiculous thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. And even for the crappy jobs, right? So this is JD Vance. JD Vance was on Joe Rogan. I'm hoping they don't ding me for this. So I'm going to play this like in the window. Let's see if that, in fact, I'm not even going to play it in the window. I'm just going to play the audio because Joe Rogan is just a maniac on hitting this stuff. But this is JD Vance, and he's talking about a CEO that they were kind of, just talking in general. And the CEO said the quiet part out loud is like effectively mad that he couldn't get illegal immigrants into the country so he could use them for their workforce.
About this, if you've got millions of illegal aliens, okay, let me tell you a story. In 2017, 2018, when I was in the private sector, I was at a business conference dinner, and I was seated next to the CEO of one of the largest hotel chains in America. This is, I think, probably 2018. And the guy is going on and on about how much he hates Donald Trump. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, why do you hate Donald Trump so much? Because again, I was sort of a Trump skeptic in 2015. And at this point, I was kind of, starting to really get on the Trump train. And he said, well, the reason I hate Donald Trump, he says, is because Donald Trump's border policies have cut down the number of illegal immigrants. And because I can't pay illegal immigrants under the table anymore, I have to pay American workers, and they want much higher wages. And I was like, this guy.
It's that. It's like whether you're talking about people coming from, let's say, to work at Amazon or at Tesla from these H-1 programs. It's that. It's the same dynamic. If you had a corporation that could dump trash into the air, they would do it. That's why we have laws preventing them from doing so. If they could dump trash into the water, they would do so. That's why we have laws against them doing so. If they can offshore costs, they want to offshore costs, whether that's sending a job overseas, whether that's hiring a 5-year-old to clean a toilet and paying them $1, they will do those things, which is the reason why we have laws to prevent them from doing those things. And as you point out, the H-1B1 visa program is being abused in and of itself because they don't even follow the laws associated with that program because they, again, want to maximize their profit. And it's not just, okay, I'm going to pay this guy 60% less. It's, I can lower wages by doing so, meaning I can force down wages across the board in the same way that unions increase the cost by virtue of having a group of people make more money. I mean, you're pulling the trend up, or you're pulling the amount of money that is going towards a particular career, a particular position, by virtue of being unionized, even in places that are not unionized because they have to compete. The same thing is true in the reverse, where you're driving down wages in the other way by bringing in people where you could pay 60% less and using that labor as opposed to other labor where you would have to pay American a typical wage. Like, these people are getting over. It's just like, and now MAGA is coming to the conclusion, this is not what we voted for. And from my point of view, this is exactly what you voted for.
It is what they voted for. I mean, look, Donald Trump had that history, right? I mean, interestingly, he misspoke when he said that he used H-1B visas a lot. He used H-2B visas, which is unskilled workers. Same principle, though. When he built Trump Tower in the 80s, there were a lot of Polish and Russian illegal immigrants to New York, and he hired Polish workers to build Trump Tower. Notoriously, didn't even pay them. They slept on site because they were so broke they hadn't gotten paid. They slept on the construction site. And so, famously, Donald Trump has a long history of this. Yeah, I mean, capitalists are going to capitalist. I mean, that's I don't even hold it against them, really. I mean, it's like, if I were playing that role, I would do the same thing. You have to in order to compete. It's a race to the bottom. That's why I don't like capitalism. But it's up to us to control these things. And it is interesting. I mean, there is an alliance here potentially between economic nationalists on the right and economic nationalists on the left. I mean, the old school big, labor unions, that they were against all this.
Yes. Yes.
the left with a class analysis. They were always against all this. We were always against all this. We understood that rapacious, globalist billionaires. I mean, Elon Musk isn't. It's true. He's not an American. Vivek Ramaswamy is not really an American. I mean, it's like these are people who they have a globalist point of view, and they chase the capital wherever it goes. I don't even blame them. But it's like they're looking out for their class interests, and we should do the same.
Exactly.
That's all.
Ted Rall, man, you were making my argument, man. But when this first came out, I was like, MAGA's right. MAGA's right. On this one, they got it right.
I just hope that for Donald Trump's he's in a tough situation, right? He wants to keep his alliance together. Molly Ivins, the famous liberal columnist for the Texas Observer, used to say, you dance with them that brung you in politics. And I think, that's kind of who's the ones that Donald Trump's going to figure out who he's got to dance with. I'm going to say them that brung him is not Team Doge. It's MAGA. They brung him. He's the reason they're the reason that he was elected again, I think, and that he's not in prison now, right?
MAGA's going to get betrayed big time on this.
Well, if they do, it's going to be.
I could be wrong.
Ugly.
But what does he have to lose? I mean, like, he's only going to be in it for 4 years. What does he have to lose?
He wants to be loved, right? And I think part of him wants to. And I would have this discussion with him. I'd say, look, Donald, you're old now. This is the last chapter of your career. You may not die next week, but we're all getting older. You're getting older. And so do you want there to be a lot of elementary schools named after you? Do you maybe want to be, on the $50 bill one day? Do you want to be remembered as a great president? You won't be remembered as a great president from your first term. So this is your chance to do a bunch of things like Nixon went to China, stuff that goes against brands that only a conservative can do. Like only a conservative can, for example, make peace with China or with Russia. Only a conservative can, bust a move on healthcare. It's got to be a Republican who does that. So it's like, do you want to go out against brand and do that? Then you could be beloved. You could leave this and end up, as the 5th president on Mount Rushmore, or you can suck up to the Doge team, and who doesn't care about you really, and they're just using you for those government contracts, and we'll see. You're not going to be beloved then. It's kind of like he doesn't have anything to lose. He really could he has the opportunity to do the right thing. If he wants.
I just get the sense that, like you said, capitalist is going to be a capitalist. You put a businessman in the White House, he's still a businessman. That's still his framing of the world, still the way he thinks. But Ted Rall, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, co-host of TMI, Too Much Information, on YouTube with the one and only the great Manila Chan from 10 a.m. 12. Ted, when do you want me on the show?
10 a.m.
10 a.m. Okay. Wait, you want me on today at 10?
Oh, I want you on.
When do you want me on? That's the other question.
I know we have something for today. Okay.
You have a good one, man. And Happy New Year, Ted.
Pardon?
Happy New Year, by the way.
You too. Happy New Year.
Have a good one.